part of the problem when people say like stay at home, especially mom,
right,
is what that's usually attached to, is even if it's not intentional, there's kind of a condescension attached to it.
Right.
Like, oh, you're a stay-at-home mom, like,
right,
you sitting on your butt, like, you know, or are you working out to keep your husband happy, like, or whatever.
You're a kept woman, et cetera,
all
et cetera.
That. And, you know, so when someone says that about like a dad, there's sort of more condescension attached to it. I know a lot of people that just, I mean, forget like your dad is busy and he's not around. Like, there's just like a lot of kids without dads, like, full stop. Like, they're not present, and that sucks. Like, those kids end up really confused in life. They don't understand like anything, you know, they're missing out on something.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Groves, normally with the On the Edge podcast, but today I have the great honor of filling in for my friend John Vroman. Anybody who's listened to a single episode of this or knows me at all knows that the Front Row Dads group, mastermind, podcast, everything about it has been a big life changer for me. So when John was going out of town for his annual European vacation, I don't even know where they are. I don't know if they're visiting the homeland of his lovely wife, Tatiana, which is Russia, or if they're going through the rest of Europe. Probably not Russia and the Ukraine right now, I would guess. So they're probably elsewhere in Europe. But John asked a bunch of us other podcasters. He's like, hey, man, will you guys step in and do a guest spot for me on the Front Row Dads podcast? So we got a little moniker made. We're here all official in the On the Edge podcast studio, but this is all about Front Row Dads. And Front Row Dads is all about, you know, family men with businesses, not businessmen trying to make time for their family. And a lot of the topics that they cover on the Front Row Dad podcast revolve around somebody that was crushing it in business and they had like lost touch with who they were as a father and a husband. And it's kind of this trying to reconstruct getting back into being a father and a husband. And I'm like, hey, let's take a little bit of a different twist on it. And let me invite my friend Patrick on, who took the other route that when they had kids, he said, you know what? I'm going to stay home with the kids. My wife crushes it. She's a doctor. She makes plenty of money for our family. Like, I want to be the stay-at-home dad. I want to do the cool projects. I want to take them to jiu-jitsu and gymnastics and the other million things that you do. And so today we're going to talk to a dad that's taken a non-traditional path, I would say, with the kids. And just welcome, man. I love you to death.
Hey, man, it's good to be here.
And our kids met at jiu-jitsu. That's one of the like 72 activities you have them in. So tell us what it's like to be like a stay-at-home dad from the beginning, or how that materialized. Because I know you're from Texas to Alaska to you've owned a bunch of businesses and you've done a bunch of stuff and you've had a really successful life. And then you're like, no, I'm going to put that aside for a while for my kids. Let my wife do the work for a while.
Yeah, you know, it's well, thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I know. You've been in Alaska too long, man.
I know. Got to get you up there, man. Get you kayaking.
We're coming.
It'll be great. So I was a CrossFit coach at the time, teaching martial arts. Loved it. Met my wife. We had been friends for a while. We both ended up divorced. So we had kind of like taken care of all of like the hard, like back end work of like, do I like this person? You know?
Right.
We both ended up single. We got together. It was great. I'd gone back to college and, you know, got divorced, kind of didn't know what I was doing with myself. And, right as I was graduating, kind of getting ready to get full steam back into the workforce, we had Violet. So we had Violet, and I was finishing up my last semester at UT, and my wife got this insanely early promotion. She got an opportunity to be the director of medicine or emergency medicine at a hospital, and she was like 36, which is very uncommon. And
well, your wife's also exceptional. So
if she had joined the Air Force, she'd have been an astronaut, you know, hashtag flat earth, right?
Right.
But no, she's, you know, she's a top notch, everything she does. And so she got this promotion, and the pay was great. The pay increase was great. It would have been more than I could have made going back to like the full-time workforce, but not massively.
Right.
But at 36, that's a golden ticket, right? And we kind of talked, and I was like, hey, you're going to be able to like write your own script from here on out. Like you can't turn this down. But it's a big learning process, right? Like she's a doctor, but that doesn't mean you know how to do a schedule, manage people, right? And I had a lot of experience with that. So I kind of like served as her like conciliary, like,
right.
you know, like, hey, don't give everyone the schedule they want, you know, this and that kind of thing. But it was a lot of work. The hospital that she started working at really needed help. So it became like an 18-hour-a-day job for her. And I was like, man, we can have like a full-time au pair. She can work her ass off. I can go to work full-time. So we were like, hey, this is not the right path for our family. I don't want other people raising my kids. She didn't want other people raising her kids, kind of situation. So I just kind of went to coaching part-time. Her schedule was so erratic, late nights, random calls, stuff like that. And family is real important to her, and it's real important to me. And I just kind of didn't want her to come home and not have the kids there, have to worry about everything that comes with running a house, right? And so I was like, well, I'll just coach part-time, you know, but listen, I'll take a step back. It was kind of awkward because I was used to working like 2 or 3 jobs at a time, just hustling, you know, young man thing. And I just didn't want to see her like stressed all the time. And frankly, we didn't want to waste all the money on childcare, even if the childcare was great. Like it's expensive. Like every parent knows. And I was like, I want to be there for my kids. And there was kind of some more to that. You know, her dad was also a real successful physician, immigrant from Peru, made his way here. Kind of standard immigrant story. The dude worked like 1 million hours, you know, and they had babysitters and stuff like that. And she didn't want that, and I didn't want that. So we kind of just sat down and made a decision. And I was like, listen, I'm not staying home. Like I can't do that. Right?
You were going to just sit on the couch and eat bonbons?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's not for me. So, you know, I started training jiu-jitsu, got a whole bunch of like fitness certifications, stuff like that, kept myself busy. But Carla wants the kids in gymnastics. She can only pick them up once a week. I'll pick them up the other time, you know, like that. I just kind of became like the zone defense for the family. And, you know, now the kids are older and that's kind of wrapping up, but it was incredible. Like I was able to just like be there.
You know, as much as we've talked, everything you just walked through makes total sense in my mind for the mom, right? Because that's like the stereotypical story that you hear. Oh, mom, you know, gave up her dreams or her this or her that to stay home with the kids because didn't want them being raised by somebody else. You know, childcare is so expensive.
Right.
And even as like open-minded as I think I can be, and as much as I love you and as much as I've seen it work, it still sounds weird when it comes out of your mouth, right? Because it's like, I know you have an entrepreneurial spirit. I know you had a bunch of like irons in the fire when you decided to give that up. What was there like a little bit of a, I don't know what the term is, ego death or something there? Like,
you know,
because I feel you own it. When the first time I asked you what you do, you're like, what do I do? I'm awesome. My wife works and kills it.
Yeah.
And I get to work out and hang out with the family and do jiu-jitsu and I cook and I clean. I'm fucking the badass Mr. Mom.
Right.
And I know that you own that, but was there some weirdness when you're making that decision?
You know, somewhat, but it certainly, you know, I think part of the problem when people say like stay at home, especially mom, is what that's usually attached to, is even if it's not intentional, there's kind of a condescension attached to it. Right. Like, oh, you're stay-at-home mom, like
Right.
you sitting on your butt, like, you know, or are you working out to keep your husband happy, like, or whatever.
You're a kept woman, et cetera, et
all
cetera.
that. And you know, so when someone says that about like a dad, there's sort of more condescension attached to it, even if it's accidental.
Right.
And it usually comes from people who, by the time they're 60, they spend most every night like drinking too much and crying about the fact that they don't know their kids, right? So it's like a weird double-edged sword.
Right.
Like they, you know, I could never be a stay-at-home anything. And it's like, well, all right, you might want to try it. But for me, like, I don't know, my mom's family especially, they were all like country people, like farmers and stuff like that. So like a farmer's a stay-at-home dad.
Right.
He doesn't leave and go to work. He walks outside and starts working, and he's there for his kids, and he, you know, like is there for the family. So I would think there was some sort of, you know, some conscientious questioning of like, what am I doing? Especially because I was like working my ass off. I loved having all these different jobs and like being dynamic, and but it didn't really occur to me that like, I was like, I'm not lactating. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't turned into a female. Like, I still turn wrenches every day. And maybe that was kind of the other thing, is like being at home with my kids. Like, I didn't turn into a lady. Right. Like I'm still a dad. I still like to lift weights and like hammer nails into stuff, you know? So I became like the project doer.
I've seen the work that you guys do in your Alaska house. That's more than a full-time job.
Right. That's all me. Right. Like, so someone's got to carry that water. So, and I just never really had a problem doing that. But also I know a lot of people that just, I mean, forget like your dad is busy and he's not around. Like, there's just like a lot of kids without dads, like full stop. Like, they're not present, and that sucks. Like, those kids end up really confused in life. They don't understand like anything, you know, they're missing out on something. Usually, I'm not speaking for everybody. Hats off to all the single moms that kill it out there. You know what I mean? But I was like, I am not going down that path. Like, my kids like need their parents, you know, and so that was kind of the energy, for lack of a better term, that we went into it with. And, you know, as like I said, this is kind of winding down. The kids are older. They're in school. It's not necessary. But what it's done is it's opened up the opportunity for me to, like, we bought an investment home in Alaska. I'm on the 40-foot scaffold, like sanding the log cabin to restain and chink it, right? Like, that's me, not Carla, which is fine. She doesn't have to if she doesn't want to, but if I'm there for it, you know, that's just kind of my role. And that's sort of prototypically like a dad's job, right? Is to do all the, you know, who's going to carry all those 2x6s? Right. Me, you know what I mean? So like that just kind of became the role that I just sort of jumped right into. And like from the outset, I was like, it's just farm life. Right. You know, like, hey, the sink is leaking, you know, go turn the water off and take the kids to school, go buy a new sink, install a new sink, you know, like that became like what I did. And that now we're not spending $500 on a handyman. And
I wish it was $500. Try to find like a plumber these days. Good luck.
No kidding. So like, and every time I did something like that, every time I cooked like a dope brisket, you know, like,
yeah, thanks for the meat, by the way.
Yeah, no problem, man.
It's amazing.
Happy to, bro.
I was about to trade my wife in for you when you brought over that brisket. I was like, oh, this is like the best meat I've ever had, hon.
You from Austin, bro.
You gotta step it up, dude. But you know, I've been around both your daughters at Jiu-Jitsu. They're so tough. How much of that being around when dad's working, seeing the life skills, helping you carry the 2x4s, helping you turn the wrench. Cause I get the feeling that, Violet's going to intimidate a bunch of men when she gets older. Cause she's
100%.
She is a tough gal.
100%.
You know, we were rock climbing and she's like just showing the boys up and like,
Right.
you can tell she has the energy of somebody who grew up with dad.
Right.
So
Right.
like, how much do you think she's just been stronger as a human being because you were around all the time?
I mean, I would like to take full credit for that. You know, she has my genes and her mom's genes, and her mom is like, you know, captain of the UT gymnastics team and like a scholarship rower, you know, so she's not unaccustomed to like hard work. Right. But yeah, it's definitely it's a difference, right? Like when a person has like a parent, I don't want to say like a dad, like that's kind of like one thing that encapsulates all men who have kids. But when a person has two role models, one of them is this like total like ass kicking, like professional physician, whatever, lawyer, CEO. And then they have someone that's like, hey, I bought you a bow today. Like, you want to learn to shoot a bow? Like they get both of those inputs, right? And so jiu-jitsu, that was my call. Carla knew I was a martial artist, you know, and I was like, hey, our daughters are not going to be easily rolled by dudes, especially when they go off to college or whatever. Like, I want them to be able to take care of themselves. And, you know, Carla saw the wisdom in that. But I was like the primary driver on that. And yeah, like you said, like you see dad like carrying stuff and like, no, get off the television, get out here and help me carry this sack of gravel, you know, like but if you go out into like middle America, not like economically middle, but like the middle of America where it's like farmers and stuff like that. Like there's girls out here riding horses, for real riding horses, you know, and like farm life. And that was just kind of what I was able to bring to her. And yeah, it's evident, like the kids that, I mean, you see it, like Violet is tall and beautiful and funny, and she's a goon, dude. Like,
yeah, she's a very feminine goon.
Yeah,
I love
exactly. She's so sweet, but like she'll double leg you. Like there's like watch your mouth, bro. Like there's no messing around. Like she got into an altercation. Like some kid was beating up some other kid. This was a couple years ago. Like ground and pounding him, and she like grabbed the kid, double legged him, and like mounted him. And she got in trouble for it. And I was like, Violet, you know, you really shouldn't be fighting in school. And she's in like second grade at the time or something like that. And, you know, she was like, I know, Dad, it was real sad. But, you know, this kid was like in fifth grade beating up on some first grader. And I was like, you double-legged a fifth grader? It's like high five, like ice creams for everybody. You know what I mean? So
good job protecting your buddy.
Like, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that energy like definitely like made its way into the kids, and that's just due to like being present, like being in their lives, like showing them who you are. Right. Like, and you don't, like, kids don't learn through words, right? Like, you can't tell them how to act. You have to show them how to act. And, you know, and it's an interesting check on you, right? Because, like, if you're like, God, you should not do whatever it is, and then you go and eat candy when you told them not to or whatever, like, oh man, like I gotta put the candy down too or whatever, you know? So yeah, it definitely, but it also opened up a door for Carla, because I was able to, like, you know, their dinner's always on the table, but I'm not making salads. Like, I'm grilling steaks and, you know, I'm still boiling it up. Right. But, you know, she gets to come home and like have kind of free reign to like be mom with the kids. And so, but yeah, like that, it opened up that door for both of us to to be there and like really have like an influence on those kids. But yeah, I did kind of turn them into goons a little bit.
That's all right.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I dislike about the modern, I don't know if I would call it feminist paradigm or whatever, is like we kind of created this weird thing where with my wife who stays at home, quote unquote, with the kids, you know, there's almost this weird thing where like we got rid of the value of the homemaker, the mom,
right,
the nurturer, where it's like, oh, well, the only way that a woman can add value is like, oh, are they making money? Are they working? Are they a career woman? Are they this? And one, I don't know if that's what my wife wanted. And two, she gets just as much value, like emotionally and spiritually, staying home with the kids. And I'm like, yeah, exactly what you're describing with Carla. Like you've been able to support her in her career growth. I would not be where I'm at if it wasn't for my wife being able to be with the kids, you know. And I've seen these things with Gary Vee where he's like, yeah, what's the ROI of your mom? Everybody's worried about return on investment and how much more they earning and where their earning potential. He's like, yeah, but what was the ROI of your stay-at-home mom? Like you're not a psychopath. You're not a serial killer.
Yeah. Right.
And so I'm guessing it's the same thing in your household where like Carla's been able to climb the corporate ladder because she knows she's supported at home. Stuff is taken care of. She doesn't have to leave work early to come home and cook dinner and shit like that because you're on top of it.
And you know, you mentioned like the sort of like strange version of like 29-year-old feminism that's like kicking around right now. And like, I don't know, this is just observational. Like we both do jiu-jitsu, so we see a pretty big swath of younger, not so young to middle-aged people all coming through for different reasons, right? But you see a big cross section of like the world, right?
All different socioeconomic,
absolutely, they're for different reasons, weight, fitness, like just everyone has their own reason for getting like choked for fun and enjoyment, right? Like it's a weird thing, but it brings in a lot of people. And you know, there's these like weird like competing like ideas that I've noticed, like I said, with these like 27-year-old hyper weird, it's hard to comprehend feminists, right? Because they're like, I want a job where I make like 6 figures because I'm badass and I'm intelligent, and that's great. If you are awesome and intelligent, you should have a job where you make 6 figures. Good for you. But you also weirdly want a dude who makes 6 figures plus 35 over what you make, which is still very like weirdly backwards, if that's your kind of footing, right? Then you get like the sort of like manosphere, like 25-year-old, like YouTube, like lib feminist roasted by based, you know, whatever. And you're like, this guy like thinks all women should be stuck at home and men are supposed to like leave the house and like bring in like tons of cash. And it's like, bro, leaving the house for work is like a super new thing. Like everyone came originally from like family farms, and like the whole family was working as like a team, right? Like dad goes and yokes the oxen and plows the field. But today that's a good time for mom to like, you know, spin some wool and like fix everyone's clothes. And, you know, when she's not doing that, she's out pulling roots out of the field with dad, you know, like everyone worked together. And we've kind of like, I've just observed that like we've gotten into this weird place where we're supposed to like be equal, but also separate. Like everyone's supposed to occupy some sort of role where like men must do this or like women must do that, or they're not men. Right. Like,
or they're not equal. Like, I love that analogy of the team, because if you are working on a farm and the whole team is rowing the same direction, where I think the modern dynamic is more about keeping score. Like, oh, I've got to make this much money, or I got to bring this much to the household. It's like, I don't know, to your point, what's the value of being able to replace your own sink? Well, in today's economy, it's probably $5,000 by the time you flood the house and you spend 3 hours on the phone with the insurance, and then you have to find a plumber. I mean, it's just, it's a nightmare, right?
It's insane. And so, and you know, that's like the old saying, I'm sure you would probably know who said it, or more likely to know who said it, but like, you know, saving money is like paying yourself. Right. So like if we're all working towards the same goal, which is making sure our kids don't end up like criminals or end up like functioning members of society, like if that's the goal, like sometimes the quarterback passes the ball. Sometimes he hands it off, like you gotta score the points. Right. And I think that weird, like keeping score competition that I think is more prevalent with like younger, like late 20s types that haven't really seen the world. Like it's kind of poisonous. Like it really damages like a lot of people's relationships. And if you look at your wife and you're like, I make all this money and she just stays at home, like you're already not on a team.
Yeah.
Right. Like
divorce is prevalent.
It's right there, bro. Like one day you're going to come home with that mentality and the house is going to be empty. Right. And that was one of the things. Maybe it's because Carla and I played sports. Like we understand, like everyone plays their role, and sometimes you got to flex, and sometimes you got to step back. But yeah, like I said, there's just sort of like I've just observed like there's like a poison in the water with a lot of these relationships, and you hit the nail on the head. Like people are trying to keep score with each other, and don't think for a moment that there weren't issues. Right. Like we had our arguments that got nasty and, like money's tight, like it gets ugly like it does in every relationship. But I think what kind of like grounded me and Carla is like, I never felt like I was going to start, like I said, like lactating. Like I'm not a, I'm not a woman. Like,
you're like, honey, I know I wanted to buy a new truck. Is it okay? Or do I need to mop the floors first?
Right. Like, exactly. Like there was none of that, it was more just like, we're all doing what we can. And I don't parent like Carla does.
Right.
I'm still dad. Like I'm uniformly a disciplinarian. Nothing gets past me. Like do not pass go, and I kind of made the joke with Carla. I was like, I feel like, I don't know if I'm speaking for all dads, but I was like, most dads want love and affection, but they'll settle for respect. Most moms want respect, but they'll settle for love and affection, just like with the disciplining and the way we interact with our kids. That's all the same. Like, wait till your father gets home is still something that is said 7 times a day in my house, right? Like, it's still like, we know who the hammer is, like, but I don't come home. And I think this is what, like, a lot of young men, especially who might be in this situation, like, if I have to stay home, do I have to like wear an apron or like,
Yeah, you don't have to lose your masculinity just
because and I think that's sort of the problem is like if you're wrapping your masculinity in this sort of like, do I wear a suit and tie every day and make 6 figures and never see my family? Like that's not a great way to go. And and we both know Casey, I remember him saying one day, like if his wife ever wanted to go back to practicing law, he'd be a stay-at-home dad in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
He loves his kids.
Dude, if my wife could replace my income tomorrow, I'd be doing jiu-jitsu 3 times a day, volleyball once a day. I'd be Mr. Mom. We'd have, I'd take over all the stuff my wife does, the science fairs and the this and that.
That's right. And look, dude, it's great because like when like I don't know what it's like when it's only mom at home, but when like dad is home, you're sort of like you're like my buddy. You're my ace. Like daddy's definitely going to let you have a little too much candy. And we're like, I know you got homework, but listen, the Lakers are playing tonight. Right. Like, you want to like, can we do it in the morning? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and so there's definitely like I said, I'm still dad, but I think what my kids also are going to see, I hope that they'll see is like, look, you got to make clear-headed decisions about things, right? Like if you're a business person and you're making, I don't know, $200,000 a year and your wife gets cold called a job offer where she's going to make $240,000 a year and you're like, no, I'm not, like you're making a bad team decision. Like just objectively a $40,000 bad team decision. Right. And that was the decision that was facing us. Those weren't the numbers, but that's what it was. And it was like, yeah, there's no way to like look at this and think, yeah, I'll take care of the kids. Like you said, like I'm doing jiu-jitsu 3 times a day.
Right.
Like I'm coaching like wrestling at like couple times a week at like the 10th Planet School that I started at. Like, I'm still like kicking ass out there. I'm just also like, hey, look, guys, I got to be done by 3:30 because, you know, school is out and I got to go pick the kids up, you know, like, and it's like a joy. Like, you know, how awesome is it for you to like come into this room knowing your kids are like 12 feet away, like, and you said like bye to them and walked out the door and went to work, right?
Right.
Like, that's how farmers do it, right? That's how like everyone has always done it. And there's, like I said, so there's just like this weird like idea that like dudes, I think young dudes especially have, is like, if I don't go out of the house and work 80 hours a week, I'm not a man. And it's like, oh, that is not what defines you as a dad, like, or a family man, right? Like, it's team play. It's all team play. So, but yeah.
I love it. And how has your wife Carla had to adjust to the team, right? Because I'm sure she's an awesome mom. And one of the things that I love about hanging out with you guys when we've got to is that both of you go out of your way to like compliment each other, right? You know, we were over at your house when you were barbecuing. Your wife couldn't stop talking about amazing cook, takes care of everything, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I just work. And then you're like, honey, stop being so humble. You do X, Y, Z, and you cry, you know, it was just really, it was really cute to see. But your wife's also very feminine. She's very maternal. Yeah. And so being away from the kids as much as she did for work, what were the adjustments for her? Was there ever a moment where like, I don't know how to describe it other than like, was there this twinge of jealousy of like, 100%. Oh, Patrick gets all this time with the kids and I'm just grinding away at the office.
Yeah. And not was there, like that was like the first like 3 or 4 years of like Violet's life, especially because, you know, she missed the kids. She wanted to have a family, you know, and this opportunity came along and sort of like on paper, she made the right decision, right? Like for long-term, like benefit to the family. But moms like being with their kids.
Right.
Like uniformly, right? Like I don't know if that's uniform, but most moms, yeah, most moms feel really strongly about being with their kids. And it was hard for her because like she would look at me and I'm like, God, these kids, man. Because I'm a dad. I don't know if it's just me, but I think a lot of dads, men, don't have the patience threshold for some of the, like, I'm not as nurturing as my wife is.
Right.
I don't know if that applies to everybody, but I know for me, I kind of fall into that more like prototypical, like masculine energy, I guess is the right way to put it, of like,
figure it out, just do it, we'll be fine.
Like, oh, I remember one time Violet fell down and she ate it, right? And they were all like, I was at like a park or something, and Carla was there with me, and Violet fell down and she hit the deck and she started crying, and I was like, well, come on over here. And I like didn't run to her. And Carla was like, why didn't you go pick her up? And I was like, because I wanted to see if she could walk. And then she got over to me and she was like, Dad, I fell. And I was like, yeah, you're fine. How did I know you were fine? You walked over here. Like,
right.
Go play. Like, get away from me. Like, I'm talking to your mom.
Right.
But so that's like a much more like dad vibe, right? A much more paternal vibe. So I would just get like exhausted with these kids, and like just Carla would be so upset with me. Like, I would love to be home with these kids. And I'm like, I know you would, but you're not.
Right.
Like, I'm doing my best. Like, I am not cut out for this the same way you are.
Right.
Like, as much as you hate being away at work, I am not good with this crying shit. Like, just the yelling. And can we cuss? I've like 500 times, but like, I am not good at this. Like, I'm really getting annoyed with the constant, like, why are you crying? Carla would be like, well, she's 9 months old. And I'm like, that's no excuse. Yeah. Right. Like, what's wrong with her? She's get it together, get a job, you know? But you know, I had to explain to her, I was like, I'm giving up a lot from like my perspective to be here and doing this. so that our family, like we're both making sacrifices. And I know it's hard for you. It's hard for me. We're all trying to learn this, figure this out. But when we started having those conversations, I was like, Carla really hates to come home and see that the kid's room is messy. I'm not cleaning that room. It's not my mess. I didn't do that. But I made sure that the kids knew, hey, before mom gets home, y'all are cleaning your room. And if you're not, you got to deal with her. Like, you don't get to see, mommy wants to come home and just play, right? And nurture you guys and do bath time or whatever it was. And I'm trying to facilitate that for y'all. But, you know, some decisions have to be made on your part to make sure that this happens. But we figured out how to have like a dad make sure that a mom could have like mom time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like long story short, like we had to like kind of break through all of those. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It was hard for her. She's a pediatrician. Like, she loves kids,
right? Like
inherently. And so not to be there with the kids was super hard on her. So we had to get through some of the angst, you know, get through some of the frustrations and kind of come to realize that we can get through it, but it is not going to be easy. And we're both working on it, but it did hurt for a while for her. Like it was not easy with the stress of like becoming a director.
Right.
Like totally new gig. She spent her whole life trying to be a doctor. Now she's in administration.
Right.
Like this is not what she signed up for. She's drinking from a fire hose. That you take all that stress and the postpartum and the, do we want to have more kids? And then we're talking about money and it's hard, you know? And so I just kind of like, you know, like, was it like you pick up your cross and bear it, you know? And I was like, well, I got to make this work. And, you know, part of that took us understanding where each other was coming from. But again, bro, that's teamwork, you know? And we were able to just figure it out. And it's clearly paid off because our kids are awesome.
Yeah.
You know
kids are
I
awesome.
mean?
Finances are great. Like you guys have made great family decisions.
Right. Right.
I do have a question going back to that clean room because I can count the number of serious marital fights or disagreements my wife have had in 9 years on like one hand. You know,
yeah,
they're not big, but there are a couple strange things like the cleaning of the room. This isn't one of us for us because we're both neurotic about things being clean and tidy. Yeah. So that worked out well. But there are certain things where it's like, for me, that would be a line in the sand I would just never draw. I'm like, this is the thing we want to go nuclear on every morning.
Yep.
And for Karina, there's things that she would be like, oh no, I'm willing to go to the mat and die for this. And vice versa, right?
This is the line.
And so the most recent one, I'm wondering how you guys deal with these things where somebody has their line. You know, my wife was like, this was every morning for like 6 months. They wake up and they fight about what shoes Gabriel can wear to school because he wants to wear the brand new Nikes or whatever. And she's like, no, those are your new shoes. Those are your nice shoes.
Right.
We can't get those dirty. And I mean, I'm not kidding, man. Every morning, it was like World War III at our house over who's wearing what shoes. And finally, I pulled Karina aside and I'm like, listen, I'm like, you grew up in a very, very frugal, you know, lower middle class or poor Hispanic family where having your clean pair of shoes for church Sunday was super important.
Yeah, those are church clothes.
I'm like, so yeah, they're church clothes. So I get where you're coming from and I understand why you're like emotionally attached to this.
Right.
But we don't go to church.
Right.
And I'm like,
exactly. What is the problem?
I'm like, so either leave the kid alone because one, you guys are fighting every day and I don't want to hear it.
Right.
Or two, start going to church. So she started going to church. Like, checkmate.
Yeah,
damn it.
Exactly.
So then I had to sit down. Then it got me. So then I had to sit down with Gabriel and be like, okay, buddy, now I need to explain to you why you need a clean pair of white shoes at all times. And you you can no longer wear those Nikes to school and scuff them up. And so when you guys have those line in the sands where it's like, no, I got this. I'm staying at home. I'm the one dealing with it. And she's like, no, but this is really important to me.
Right.
How do you navigate that sticking with the teamwork mentality?
Yeah. You know, well, and Carla and I are both forceful personalities.
Yeah, you guys are both a little opinionated.
We have opinions of things, and sometimes we argue both as people and with one another on principle. It seems like we just draw lines in the sand, and we're not giving up on them, right? And that was part of our that was part of what we had to figure out coming together, like her, I don't know, spirit or whatever, like her personality was definitely part of what drew me to her, right? So when I was like, oh, you are like absolutely losing your mind over something that seems absolutely ridiculous to me, right? Like, I have no idea why this is a problem. Like, zero. But I can tell it's very important to you because of all the slamming, right? So, all right. Well, also, man, I signed up for this, right? I was like, I knew what I was getting into. And after a few years, she kind of realized that she knew what she was getting into, right? So the first thing we kind of did was we stopped taking it as personally, right? Especially when you are as articulate as both she and I are, we can cut each other pretty deep. Yeah. You know, with what we say. Like we can get at it if we want to, right? And we used to really go at it. Not so much anymore because first of all, look, I love you. You make absolutely zero sense to me right now. But that doesn't mean it's not important, and I love you, so I'm going to just, half the time just be like, hey, this is what mommy wants. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is really important to her.
This is really important to her, and, there are times when I am, getting in those kids, just getting in their asses like a wedgie, right? Over something. Some sort of disrespect, and I have some sort of big philosophical reason why you should never speak to your elders this way or something. And she used to try to interrupt me and stuff like that. And she finally just realized, she was like, you know what? This guy's a great guy. I have no idea why he's pissed about this, but it's probably for a good reason, because I wouldn't have had kids with this guy if I didn't trust his instincts, right? So those were the first steps that we made, and then we just had to learn to let shit go. I think that's really the hardest thing for people in a marriage to do is man, do you really want to die on this hill? You know what I mean? Mom's gonna lose her mind if the living room is messy when she comes through the door. She likes tidy. I don't care about tidy as much, but she really likes tidy. I think it's unnecessary, but I love my wife. It's super important to her. So you know what? Hey, kids, mommy wants the house clean. And if y'all don't do it, she's going to blow like a volcano when she comes through the door. And that's not what y'all want to do, because it's 30 minutes till bedtime when she walks through the door. So you better have this room clean or whatever, right? So we just kind of learned to let the other lead, especially when it seemed important. And then after 10 years, I've kind of learned to see the wisdom in why she feels that way, right? And she's learned to see the wisdom in why I feel that way. Carla never really understood why I didn't want stuff like the kids going into the garage or things like that. It's why not? What a stupid thing to get mad at the kids over. Then she saw my daughter playing with my miter saw. Right. And then she was like, oh, that explains all of the frustrations. I didn't want the kids coming into our bedroom because guns live in there, right? Or whatever it is, and my mentality was, I don't have to explain everything to you. You're 6. I don't care what you think. Just stay out of my room. That's the rule. But by that same token, she was like, maybe you should explain as they get older why. And I'm I don't have to explain anything. They're kids. Right. But she's right. I'm right. They should not come in the room, but I can't just pass down mandates that make no sense, So once we kind of got in that groove of understanding, if it's important to you, it should be important to me. Right. all right, well, then I guess it's important to me.
Right.
And it doesn't have to make sense. And I also don't have to say, this doesn't make any sense, but I support you.
Right.
It's just what you want. Like, okay, like we're a team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and you know, one of the things we've been talking a lot about is like how important it is for you to have daughters that grow up in the outdoors, and you guys have this beautiful house in Alaska, even though you live down here in Las Vegas, because that's where your wife's job is.
Right.
But your wife's making a huge, okay, he must have some wisdom in that, because you guys are going to move back to Alaska and just kind of come back and forth. Why is that super important for you to have your daughters grow up like basically like mountain men? Because I've seen your house out there. I mean, when you have to walk to the school bus stop with a large 45 just in case you come across a bear, that's a different type of lifestyle than most city dwellers are used to.
Yeah, you know, I think. Yeah, so we moved up there right before COVID became COVID, right? And then we got kind of stuck up there because COVID became COVID. Like everything like melted down real fast everywhere, right? And Carla knew I liked the outdoors. You know, when we were dating, we'd go camping a couple times. We'd hike, you know, but we're from Texas originally. So, and from Austin. So by the time she got to Austin, like a lot of the natural, like Texas hill country had just kind of turned into suburbs. Like my parents' and grandparents' property is like a golf course now, you know, but I used to like hunt deer out there when I was a kid and go, I went dove hunting out there, you know?
Yeah. Now it's the 16th.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, you know, she knew I was kind of raised fishing and doing outdoor stuff, but in some ways I think she just chalked that up to, oh, he's a boy. Like he likes boy stuff, you know, whatever. But she's pretty rough and tumble, you know? And so she would always go hiking and camping with me when we could. But I was kind of an advocate for getting out of the city. Like, just something always told me like millions of people around you. It's just not, that's not right. Like, it's not good for your head. Like, I couldn't really articulate it right. But we went up to Alaska and the girls just blossomed. Like they flourished. And maybe I don't hope I'm not speaking for her, but she just saw it. She was like, oh, this is what he was talking about. Like, they can be kids here. Like, you know, when we're down here, the concern is like, why don't you have Jordans? Right?
Yeah.
But when you're in Alaska, the part of Alaska where we live, you've got Target, you know, like Bass Pro Shops, and REI and Fred Meyer, which is like a grocery store with like, that sells clothes.
It's like a super Walmart.
That's exactly right. And, you know, so you like any day of the week, you'll see like 3 kids with the same clothes on.
Right.
Like, because there are 4 places you can shop. Statistically, everyone's going to have the same clothes on eventually, right? And stuff like that is not as important up there. You know, we have friends that like spend their winters because it's super dark. They're like, it's pretty dark out here. You know, there's nothing really to do. I guess I'm going to learn how to cross country ski. Take the kids with you, you know, and like, oh man, it's going to be a pretty day tomorrow. Let's go ice fishing.
Right.
You know, the way that you see things, like the value of things changes when you're not like overcome with other stuff that you would especially get in a major metropolitan, right?
Right.
And so, you know, the girls hauling firewood, you know, it's hard to teach kids like the value of chores unless the house is 10 degrees below zero.
Right.
And if you don't bring the wood, we don't have a fire, right? So you should go back downstairs and get the wood. But it's cold and snowy. I know, and it's cold in here too.
Right.
Because you haven't brought the wood in for daddy to start the fire, right? You know, like these things become like eminently more important.
Right.
Right. And so that was why I wanted to go up there. It was kind of a wing and a prayer. You know, I just liked the outdoors, and we had looked at like Asheville, North Carolina. We had thought about Oregon. We had thought about like Washington, and Alaska was sort of like the last, like it was like the pie in the sky. Like we went there and we're like, let's see if Alaska would work. We've heard it's beautiful, and we were just completely overcome by it. Like it was just beautiful. Carla was just like witnessing majesty left and right, like mountains, and like we have a river on our property. Like,
yeah, like you guys can see Mount Denali from your front porch.
Right, exactly. Like it's nuts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
your pictures from your porch look like everybody's screensaver. Like all the city dwellers that want to pretend like they're the outdoors by having screensavers of nature. And,
right.
And there's look across from my porch. There's a bear in the stream catching salmon with Mount Denali in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, that's actually your front porch.
No,
I was like,
yeah.
Oh.
Like, and you know, we had a moment this last summer. We'd put the girls in like a Girl Scout camp type thing, and Penelope refused to wear bug spray. And like, if you don't know, like the mosquito is like jokingly the state bird of Alaska. Right. Like they're huge and they are everywhere. 10 degrees outside, mosquitoes. Like it's the wild. Like there's trees, it's a forest, you know what I mean? And so like there's bugs and like animals here, right? And Penelope refused to wear bug spray because she's 5 and you're not going to tell her what to do, right? And she came home from camp with probably 17 million mosquito bites on her, and she was miserable. And the next day she wore bug spray.
Right.
And that was it. I didn't have to lecture her. Yeah. I did, like, her mom didn't have to explain to her the effects of, like, you know, allergic reactions when you get bit by a bug. No, she just saw it all firsthand. Like, if you don't listen to mom and dad about these things, like, clearly mom and dad knew. They were right.
Yeah.
And the next day, before we even left the door, you know, and so when we went up there, all of those things sort of started to become apparent. And they became apparent because we also weren't worried about, we got to go get you some new J's. You know, does dad have the coolest car on the block? You know, does everyone have mom's business card? Like those kind of things become irrelevant. Like, it's cool to be really successful financially or just like socially in Alaska. It's really cool. But do you know how to drive on the snow?
Right.
That's also way cool. In fact, it's more important here than anything else, right? Like, did you check your spare tire to see if you even had one? Like, so it's sort of like, you know, the prototypical simple life. And what it did is it slowed Carla down. Like, you know, she was like, oh God, I do not know how far I want to like dive into this like 1980s movie working woman kind of life. Like, the kids are chill, my husband's chill, like he's standing on a scaffold with a sander, like stripping like the logs of our log home. There's food in the fridge. We got everything we need, you know, like, and so it like simplified and streamlined everything. And my thought was it would put things into perspective. Because I very much valued all of the time that I got to spend out in the sticks, you know, hitting trees with sticks and pretending I was slaying dragons or whatever, you know, I did as a kid, and like watching out for rattlesnakes and, you know, things like that. And I really valued that. And I wanted to give that to the girls. And Carla, God love her, man, she loves the shit out of me. And she was like, yeah, I mean, I'm from Dallas. I guess I'll move to Alaska. Sure.
Champion.
Why not?
Champion level wife.
Yeah, exactly. 100%, right? But, she had buy-in on my husband's not an idiot. I might be missing something, but I'm going to roll the dice on him. And it's all worked out famously. We've got a house. We've got a rental property, it helps pay for the mortgage up there, and like I said, saving money is paying yourself,
Yeah.
And the kids get to see us investing in the family, right? Like when I'm up there working, Carla frames it to the girls as daddy has to go to work, because I do. I have to go get materials and sit in the sun for 7 hours and do stuff, to make sure the house is working. And it is work, and the kids see that, and it's been great for them. And everyone up there is like that. My neighbor, redid his own roof. He's a contractor, the dude across the street from us, he's he works for NOAA, but he's a fisheries scientist, and his wife can change her own tires on her car from the summer tires to the winter tires, they're just rad people who can just sort of handle what happens to them, and that also builds a community. We all were partying with the kids one night because it's an Alaskan summer. Sun doesn't go down till 1 a.m. or there's light until at least 1 a.m. So all the dads just impromptu at 9:30, all the wives were gone. And we all just we all have daughters except for one boy on the block. That dude's going to know everything about women when he grows up, because there's 7 or 8 girls and him. So he's going to have it all figured out. But we went to his dad's house at 10 o'clock and they just sprayed each other with a sprinkler, and we all drank beer and sat by the fire, and so it, she's totally in for that.
That's awesome.
So she loves it. And, it's been good for her, and it's been great for the kids. That's why they're who they are. They don't put up with anything from anybody, which I love. Right now it's a pain because bedtime is a fight.
Right. Having strong-willed daughters, as you have 2 and I have 1, is both a blessing and a curse.
Right.
Yeah.
But no one's going to roll that little girl.
Yeah, for sure.
When she's 35 and some dude.
Yeah, nobody's going to walk all over her. No chance.
She's totally in control of her own destiny. So
I want to keep this around an hour for John's portion of the podcast on Front Row Dads, and then you and I will continue the conversation on the On the Edge podcast if anybody wants to tune in there. But just rapid fire, man. Best part and worst part of being a quote unquote stay-at-home dad.
Best part is totally being there for everything that my kids do. The worst part is being surrounded by children 24 hours a day. They don't listen.
I can see you sometimes when you walk into Jiu-Jitsu by 4, you're like, Scott, how's it going, man? What'd you do today?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more. Did you see the Laker game?
Please.
What is going on?
God, I need an adult. My 9-year-old daughter does math at a 7th grade level, and she didn't put socks on today when she left the house. She's been wearing shoes with no socks. I need help.
Right.
Someone save me. So, but yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world, man.
Yeah. And then just closing question for this, this is going to be coming out summer, September-ish of 2023. What are you most looking forward to for you and your family going into the end of 2023 and maybe even beyond?
Oh, man. Getting the kids back up to Alaska, putting them in school up there, and just starting that whole thing over again. Skiing, ice fishing, all the cool stuff that very few people have access to.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on the Front Row Dad podcast. I want to talk to you more about knives and knife fighting and all the other cool stuff you do. So we'll continue the conversation. But thanks for being a guest on John Vroman's podcast. And John, thanks for letting me fill in for you.
Yeah.